Who am I? The Capricorn. Secrets of the Zodiac. By Gypsy Rose Deville. Part 1, Chapter 1. Can't get right. Born under a bad sign. Just out of curiosity, have you ever felt as if everything you do, think, or say is just wrong by everyone else's standards? Or do you consider yourself a habitual rebel always in resistance to authority and strict rules? What about being the child always asking why, infuriating any adult in your path because you wouldn't just comply? I don't know how many can relate, but my entire life I've felt as if I could never do anything right. In my mind, this was only being confirmed by those around me, constantly repeating that I'm bad, while insisting that I change one aspect or another about my personality or behavior. Feeling that something had to be wrong with me, since I've never been able to accept things as easily as others, if at all. Even to my own family, in which I self-identify as the black sheep. From my severe allergy to conformity, how I think, behave, to even my unique style. Unlike most though, I embraced my individuality early in life, which allows me to experience and enjoy more in my journeys, initially instilling a no apologies, no regrets mentality. Who I am is quite difficult to explain, since I've never been able to be classified beyond my race or gender. So, I'll start by sharing with you some of my experiences that may have affected me the most, so you can try to at least understand why I am who I am, and why I came into the understanding that I was never meant to be classified in the first place. My life began with the dramatics, even before actually entering this world. Diagnosed with preeclampsia her third trimester, my mother became severely ill towards the end of her pregnancy with me. As a remedy, her genius doctor accidentally prescribed her the wrong medication, damn near killing us both. I am convinced that this event holds some responsibility for my expanded consciousness from birth, as well as for the enhanced spiritual gifts I tried denying most of my life. I was born January 6, 6:06 p.m., room 606, weighing 6 pounds 8 ounces. I am my mother's firstborn and only girl, and from our first introduction, I swear she deemed me to be Rosemary's baby. My birthday makes me a Capricorn. Loving my zodiac sign, even with the stigmas that most will certainly define you by. For instance, once I share my sign with someone, I get these side-eye glances, and comments like, "Oh, I know about you Capricorns." Immediately deemed either mean, a know-it-all, stubborn, or a super freak, which could all possibly be true, but I promise there is so much more to me. When describing me, I guess I'm what most consider crazy as hell. My bold, fearless, and outspoken personality beginning at birth. A tomboy at heart, trapped in a diva's body, with a philosopher's curious mind, blessed with a plethora of creative talents and spiritual gifts. Goofy, clumsy, adventurous, a daredevil by nature, and a lover of life with all it has to offer. Not only have I always thought differently from everyone else, in every way possible, but then I dare to be outspoken and bold in my opinions and beliefs. Of course, this being the root of most of the judgment I've been experiencing throughout my life. Luckily, I've been able to develop an attitude, early in life, which doesn't give a damn about other people's opinions, being a strong believer that those opinions are none of my business. Intentionally remaining in what my mother describes as my own little bubble. You will notice this yourself in several of my stories, when hearing me say, I wasn't thinking much of it. Because I enjoy minding my own business, especially with everything I've done in my life. Who am I to judge? I've always been extremely intelligent, gaining an educational advantage by starting this part of my journey in Europe. I have an insatiable passion for learning, especially when the subject appeals to my interests. An overachiever by nature, due to a strong work ethic rooted in my pride and curious mind. Yet still I was always in trouble for one thing or another, with the main problem for everyone being my mouth. As I said, I never had issues voicing my opinions, but that has also been one of my biggest struggles, and at times even my downfall. Most either immediately love me or hate me when first introduced. However, because of how I carry myself, even if you hate me, you'll still want to know who I am. Many have also called me mean, or a bitch, because I have often failed to use my filter, which most people have located between their mind and their mouth. Many had to find out the hard way that, even though I look like a lady, I don't speak much like one. I can't help but to say what is on my mind, pleasant or not, when demanding my respect and enforcing boundaries. Although I'm a prideful person, egotistical even at times, I definitely try to avoid coming across as full of myself. Honestly, I just don't appreciate being made a fool of, as if I'm the butt of some kind of joke. Let's just say, I don't respond very well in those situations. You will immediately know if I'm ever feeling some kind of way. And I definitely lack sensitivity in my delivery, since that was a concept I rarely experienced growing up with my mother. Purposely resistant to anyone trying to control or enforce strict rules upon me. In fact, being the habitual rebel, who absolutely has to do anything someone tells me I cannot. Never been one to just accept things said or taught to me without doing my own research or experiencing for myself. And never having temptation to conform to the norm, because I could care less about the latest trends. I also hate the concept of cliques, which was one of those things I did not know existed until I moved to the US. Unable to understand, or agree, with the mob mentality. Where a group of people becomes so collectively convicted in their beliefs, that they become threatening to any opposition. I mean seriously. That shit is weird. I'm a natural-born leader, but will rarely volunteer to do so. In fact, I have often gone into situations with all intentions to remain faded in the background, but due to that strong work ethic, I'm rarely successful. This is because I'm not only a perfectionist, but also bossy as hell. Combine that with the fact that I never shut up, I will always find myself in a leadership position even if I'm not holding the title. Embodying a confident, uninhibited boldness, I am always willing to do or stand up for what is right. I do not say anything behind a person's back that I am not brave enough to say to their face. The latter is cowardly to me, and I have too much pride for that. Always ready to confront my issues with people head-on, regardless of their status or title, and without fear or hesitation. In fact, fear was not a concept I even truly recognized until I had children. Having been raised by a father who insisted that I fear nothing but God, and you shouldn't even fear God, but I digress. Needless to say, I internalized this on a foundational level. This has definitely been one of the most beneficial of the personality traits I possess, allowing me to survive some of the most recklessly dangerous situations and always coming through flawlessly. As an army brat, I've seen many parts of the world, born in Stuttgart, in 1982, at 5th General Hospital. My dad was mainly stationed at Robinson Barracks. We weren't originally housed on the barracks however, but rather at 212 Lavender Strasse. Located in the middle of a German community right outside of the barracks, where a lot of high-ranking officers' families were placed. Because of this, I was blessed in having the pleasure of encountering many different types of people, from various cultures, finding the beauty in each and every experience. In my childhood memories, this country's landscape and energy remains the picture of perfection. Between the glorious mountains and hills, antique buildings, intentional care for the environment, simplicity, to even how people interacted with each other. Little things about this place were not appreciated, until it no longer existed for me. Like experiencing each season in its magnitude, yet still at its most pleasant. Summer's so amazingly beautiful with its crisp clear skies full of fluffy clouds, never scorching or uncomfortable, forcing you outdoors to indulge. Autumn months bringing the most visually appealing colorful changes to the landscape, leaving you in awe, as those colors float from the branches. Winters with its thick blankets of pure white snow, deep enough to play hide-and-go-seek in, never missing out on a white Christmas. And spring showers that always promised you the most illuminating rainbows without fail. Germany will always hold a special place in my heart, having the most amazing adventures there. Allowing me to be a child that could venture safely without fear. A child being kidnapped, gang violence and ghettos did not exist in my world yet. I had never heard the words, "be home before the streetlights come on," until our final move to the US, being at least 11 when it was said. In Germany, at 5 years old, I was waking up before my parents, leaving the house to not return until dark. No one needed to worry or be overprotective, because the entire community took care of the children. In fact, I was literally spoiled shitless by this community. For example, going to the local laundromat just to get a lollipop from the owner, or riding my bike to the zoo, where they never charged me. Every day before school I would stop by the canteen for a free ham and cheese croissant, then to the PX on the barracks after school to get a free Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And I won't even get started on what happened if I visited my mother's job, where all of her bosses and co-workers felt obligated to gift me, whenever in their presence, even if they had nothing to give. One time I left there with glue, a hole puncher, and a stapler. Always having the most phenomenal voyages anytime I'd exit the front door of that apartment, be it with friends or alone. My very first bike was given to me when I was about 5 years old. Loving this bike like a best friend and naming her Speedy, she gave me the ability to travel across this majestic European landscape of pure nature, with the wind in my face, feeling as though I could fly. With the ability to do all sorts of tricks and stunts by age 6. I'd antagonistically challenge the older kids, annoyingly gloating when they couldn't match my skills. Abrasively cocky, because I'd constantly push myself beyond my own limits, no matter how much it may have scared me. Since, of course, I had to conquer absolutely anything that I feared. But the only thing I had to worry about harming me in those days was me. So I was lucky that I did not begin my life with this built-in worry about the external world, which allowed me to focus on the internal. I'll never forget this one hill, which cut through the vineyards, at least half a mile long, practically sitting at about a 90-degree angle. At the bottom of this hill was a busy two-way street. Once you crossed this though, there was the entrance to our apartment's garage, which perfectly aligned with the path coming from the hill. However, our garage also had a long driveway with a sharp 360 circular pattern downward slope. This hill scared the absolute shit out of me, creating an obsessive determination of conquering my fear, by making it all the way into the garage with Speedy, successfully, without stopping. Remind you, I was about 6. Thinking back on it now, I would have died if it were either of my own children attempting this. Finally gaining the nerve to attempt this feat, I remember my heart almost exploding, as I took off on my bike. Seeing all of the oncoming traffic below, I don't think my bike ever went as fast as it was going at that moment. Now I forgot to mention that my bike had several malfunctioning issues, due to all of my crash dummy stunt tactics. The handle brakes were no longer working, so I could only press backwards on the pedals to stop. The bell had fallen off, as well as both reflectors. Oh, and the handlebars no longer remained in place, moving around as if being manufactured as an exercise bike. Needless to say, this probably ranks amongst the top 10 on my dumbass decisions list. I successfully reached the bottom of that hill, and miraculously across the oncoming traffic, feeling like Evel Knievel, as I entered the apartment's driveway. That is until my bike clipped the median of the slope, and I went flying onto the concrete, having the wind knocked out of me for at least 5 minutes. I still carry most of those scars until this day. This did not stop me from attempting that hill the very next day though. And this attempt, along with every attempt after, was successful. From that point on, I began embracing my ability to face my fears, becoming one of the foundational attributes to my personality. Germany was also cultured and community-oriented in the best ways. Like having those old-fashioned ice cream trucks, selling giant scoops, single or doubles, of the creamiest and richest flavors you could imagine. Fruits everywhere, from the crab apple trees to the blackberry bushes, no one caring about washing anything before eating them either. Fruit trucks that came right into the neighborhood, with prices so low that it's unfathomable today. As well as deliveries of beverage crates, such as sodas, and sparkling or distilled water. Germany also being extremely mindful when it came to the environment, so recycling was not even an option. Every morning you could find crates of empty glass bottles sitting outside everyone's residence. What I was unaware of, back then, is that companies sent people to collect those crates. I was always grabbing a crate, from in front of whoever's door, to take down to the local candy shop. In exchange, the owner allowed me access to as much candy as my tiny hands and pockets could hold. How was I to know I was actually stealing? The man should have said something. Germany also has these annual events that were so fascinating to me as a child. Like the one where everyone spring cleans their homes, removing all excessive clutter to the sidewalks for anyone to take. It was called junking, like an annual yard sale that was free to all. And then there was fashing, a week-long celebration, in which you were liable to see anything. It's their belief that, for that week, they're not held accountable for their sins, almost like a purging, but never seeing violence, if you know what I mean. Oktoberfest was the best, and probably my favorite. I could walk into any tent where celebrations were being held, and the adults would be insisting that I taste the beer. I'd be drunk after 3 sips. Now, you must understand, that beer in Germany would be equivalent to wine in Italy. It's a staple of their culture, so don't judge what you haven't experienced. I can honestly say I was never harmed in any of these scenarios, but I would sleep like a baby. Europeans are also very comfortable in their own skin, seeming to be nudists at heart. It was nothing to be playing on the playground, and look up to see a couple, naked on their balcony, sunbathing or making out. And rather you went to an indoor or outdoor pool, swimsuits were optional, most choosing not to. Remind you, majority did not resemble the cast of Baywatch either, but rather the cast of Cocoon. Hence why I gained a very positive view of body image and sexuality early. The architecture and landscaping were all so breathtaking to me as well, literally like pictures straight out of a fairy tale. Visiting places like the Ludwigsburg Castle, and theme parks like Europa Park, would transport me to another world whenever entering. And the eclectic blend of authentic foods from various cultures, well, I won't even get started, but just know, the blame can be placed here, as to why I am such a foodie today. I'll always love Germany for these reasons and more, longing to one day return and compare it today to what I remember. Now children of military parents tend to develop one of 2 personalities, the loner that gets good at fading in the background because it makes it easier when they inevitably have to move again, or the socialite that learns to make friends quickly wherever they go but never gets too attached. Of course, I became a master of the latter. I am what you would call a people's person, even when I am not trying to be. I guess I have an energy that makes others around me a little too comfortable, a little too fast. For instance, complete strangers tell me their life stories while waiting in line at a grocery store. The ironic part is, I really don't like to be bothered, because even though I appear to be an extrovert, I'm an introvert at heart. I didn't start out this way though. From childhood through my 20s, I kept a crowd around me, always craving to be doing something, anything. But somewhere along the line, I changed into the person who prefers to be home in the bed watching Hulu. I realized that I have a gift, allowing me to understand, and empathize, with those who confide in me. And, somehow, I seem to help through just a simple conversation. It takes a toll on me though because I can feel their emotions, so heavily that it becomes draining. It would be decades before I ever truly understood this gift in its magnitude. Now, I know I carry an extreme bias, but 80s babies are by far the best generation of insane weirdos to ever walk this earth. Beyond the outrageous fashion and hairdos, the 80s baby was welcomed into a world battling conflicting ideals and morals, economic turmoil, war, suppressed racial conflict, sexism, feminism, rising awareness of the LGBT community, religious contradictions, propagated education, HIV and AIDS, serial killers, rising cults, eclectic options of music, advancement of technology in the modern home and workplace, crack epidemic, and gang wars. Just to name a few of our daily headlines in which the lists are infinite. But we also came into the world with 10 times more freedom, access to information, opportunity for economic advancement, ability to love who we choose, and the ability to take advantage of previous generations' mistakes and successes. Definitely arriving with a far more colorful view of the world than those before us, but still having to battle the oppression of most of our parents' outdated traditional ways of thinking, as well as forced agendas based on their lost dreams or family legacies. This was a futile rebellion though because we were already deemed, as an entire generation, as losers. I grew up hearing, and believing, that we were considered Generation X, Gen X. Seems like no one cared to ask how this hypothesis or conclusion was even drawn. But clearly, before even knowing our own names, failure was already agreed upon for us as an entire generation. Apparently, this changes to Gen Y, if Googled today, but doesn't change my childhood experience or the market left. Leaving me with feelings of underlying condescending judgment of being hopeless, with a future that's murky at best. This generation still carries an ignited spirit though, and if ever damaged or broken, proves to become more toxic than a cobra snake bite. And because of the strength and power within this spirit, it seems as though the entire world has made it their priority to destroy or corrupt it. A major enigma I suffered during early childhood was the fact that I was born a female. Those of us born in the 80s did not see their roles in the world as the women of the previous generations did, which made for confusing times for girls like me. I was blessed with 3 brothers who are my world. My eldest brother's birthday is 2 years and 2 days before mine, one of those things I think always bonded us in a special way, even though we did not get the chance to grow up together. He's not my mother's child but was born the same year my parents were married. Funny part about our relationship is the fact that, even though he's my big brother, I've always played the big sister role, actually becoming one when I was about 4.5 years old, which of course I immediately took very seriously. You can mark this as the official beginning of my nurture stage, where this feeling of obligation to take care of others that I cared about became prominent, most times putting their needs before my own. Of all my brothers, my middle brother and I spent the most time together as kids, because my baby brother did not come along until I was in high school. In fact, many people would just judge me as another teen statistic when seeing me with my baby brother, because I carried him on my hip everywhere I went, until I left home and had children of my own. Believe me when I say that there is nothing in this world that I would not do for my brothers, because I know without a doubt that I can always call either one of them to have my back at any given time no matter what. Being the only girl, however, plays a huge role in the tomboy side of me, while also contributing to my issues, from witnessing how differently my brothers and I were treated. Boys are never told to sit up straight or cross at the ankles. Boys are never told they're talking too loudly or scolded for playing in dirt. And being aggressive or assertive is commended and praised, unlike girls like me who were constantly berated. Of course, I loved when getting dressed up and looking pretty, but it was always short-lived because I'd mess up my hair, get stains on my clothes and destroy every pair of shoes in my presence. I loved riding my bike and playing tag, but I also liked playing with dolls and playing house. Hating the fact that I was not just given the freedom to be me, without anyone's preconceived notions of who I should be, just because I'm a girl. On the flip side though, I still love girly girl things. Being lucky enough to have some of those special experiences most girls desire in their youth, like being a cheerleader, being a member of the homecoming court, to even winning a beauty pageant. Being a girl causes its own set of insecurities when it comes to self-body shaming. By the time I was in high school, living in the US, I developed an entirely different view about body image than the one that I'd gained as a child in Germany. Beyond the dark skin complex I once struggled with, I also had issues with my weight, silently suffering from several mental issues behind this extreme insecurity. Everything from compulsive eating disorder, bulimia, to anorexia. I know now that this is rooted in watching my mother's personal struggles with her weight, and how it's affected her confidence. Versus my father, who at one point was a professional bodybuilder, and still a personal trainer to this day. Even though I didn't begin gaining weight until I was about 7 or 8, after moving to the US, but I digress, I weighed 215 pounds by the time I was 12. Never having the ideal body shape, this is only exaggerated when my weight is out of hand. Suffering from nausea, which is the medical term for no ass at all, and having squared hips. Not developing breast until high school, and even then, barely filling a B cup until having children. All of my weight gain focusing on my midsection, giving me a bad case of booty do, which is another medical term for cases where the stomach tends to stick out more than the booty do. Don't forget the 3 chins, huge feet, and the fact that my thighs rub together so bad they become raw. The summer before 8th grade, my Aunt Lucy asked my parents if I could stay with her, in Maryland, for a few weeks. This was the summer I officially became a girly girl. My auntie looked me in the eyes and said, "Your face is too pretty for you to be carrying all that weight." Enrolling me in sports and cheerleading camps, teaching me to eat healthier, and encouraging my confidence with a head-to-toe makeover. Getting my nails and hair done, buying me cute lacy underwear. No more cartoons or days of the week for me. And even getting me a new wardrobe. Witnessing how empowered she was as a woman, a professionally successful, beautiful, dark-skinned woman, who owns her sexuality in a way I hadn't seen prior, resonated with me, confirming something that I already felt about myself, but was always asked to suppress by being meeker and milder in my manner. My aunt changed me that summer, initially instilling the lesson of how to appreciate my feminine nature, walk proudly and boldly in the skin I've been given, and taking pride in my appearance to boost my own confidence. Lessons that I carried throughout my life as I continue to struggle with my weight. I've been as big as 215 pounds and as small as 115 pounds, over time learning how to love my reflection no matter what. So I definitely embody a demeanor that screams, if you don't like how I look, don't look at me. My auntie's lessons only added to the foundation my father had already built by ensuring I knew I was beautiful from birth. Did I mention that I was the ultimate daddy's girl, and proudly still today? Thank you very much. No, you don't understand, I took it to a new level as a child, because he was not only my first love and best friend, but my hero. As a child, in my eyes he was a combination of the Hulk and God himself, always idolizing his dominant demeanor that commands respect without one word ever spoken. It did not help that the military base we lived on in Germany had our last name. So of course, I thought we owned it, and my father was the king. Another reason I never knew fear like most. Because if anyone thought about messing with me, without blinking an eye I would quickly let them know, I'ma tell my daddy. However, I also learned at an early age how to utilize this lifeline wisely, because once I told my daddy, it was out of my hands. I can remember this one occasion in Germany, while at my daycare summer camp, I got into trouble outside on the playground. As punishment, the camp counselor thought it was a good idea to make me walk around the building and count the bricks. While doing so, the sky opens up out of nowhere with raindrops. The counselors began ushering all of the other children back into the building, apparently forgetting about me. This just so happens to also be a very rare occasion in which both of my parents are together picking me up, and earlier than usual. Now I will admit that the scene was not a good look, as they pull up to see their 5-year-old daughter alone outside in the rain. However, they waited until I got into the car to ask me what was going on. We were at least a quarter of a mile up the road, as I began explaining to my parents why I was unaware everyone had gone in the building. To which my father responded without a word, by slamming on the brakes of our car so abruptly, that I was thrown into the back of my mother's seat. He proceeded to pop open the glove compartment where he had a butcher knife stashed, which he grabbed before throwing the car into reverse and commencing to speeding back to that daycare center. In reverse. He was literally ready to murder that camp counselor. Despite my mother's screams and pleas to stop his foolishness, it wasn't until I begged him to calm down, that he finally stopped the car. From then on, I've been extremely cautious about what I tell my daddy. As a little girl, my dad always made me feel like the most important person in his life and spoiled me rotten. He also talked to me like a person rather than a child and, even more so, dropped jewels of knowledge that not only intrigued my curious mind to go learn more but empowered me to never be a weak woman that needed a man. He also taught me how to kill a man with my bare hands at 5, showed me how to aim a sawed-off barrel shotgun by 9, and how to properly stab the hell out of somebody by 11. My father was never soft with me, and I think that is always the misconception when I claim to be a daddy's girl. Just the opposite actually. See, the doctor told my parents I was going to be a boy originally. And in the words of my father, he'd already decided how he was going to raise me, so he wasn't about to change his mind because I came out missing a few parts. He taught me how to use my hands, use them to fight, to cook, to create, and even to fix things and change my own tires. He also taught me to embrace my rebel side and never accept the limitations placed on me. He forced me to be tough and strong in my mind, and instilled skills and wisdom that most men do not even embody today. He knew that because I was born a black woman, my path was destined to be plagued with false limitations, and he gave me the foundational wisdom I would need to thrive in adversity. Combine this, with my natural bold outspoken nature, and you have my mother's worst nightmare. My mother is actually one of my greatest inspirations, but our relationship has been a long and rough journey because she is also one of my greatest critics, often even my arch nemesis. And although I was blessed to inherit her scholarly intellect, later learning to also embody the foundational skills, knowledge, and wisdom she gave as well, in reality we are complete opposites in so many ways. For example, I have an aggressive personality and she is passive-aggressive. I enjoy walking on the wild side, and she prefers to play it safe. I am more carefree and uninhibited whereas she defines poise. She's of a much lighter complexion than me and has always been effortlessly beautiful, having a figure with perfect proportions no matter her weight. And as a natural scholar, she's always been the top of her class, salutatorian in high school, magna cum laude for bachelor's, and going as far as to have obtained her PhD. As her only daughter, I have never been ladylike enough, soft-spoken enough, or mild-mannered enough for her taste. She is gracious and polite, never makes a scene, and plays the role of a lady perfectly. And as a child, in my mind, she actually represented everything I hated about being born a girl, which you already know was an actual and real resentment I struggled with for a long time. I always felt inadequate or unable to live up to her expectations. It did not help that her expectations for me were always far and beyond that of which she expected from my brothers who could do no wrong in her eyes. For example, I remember in 5th grade I brought home a report card with 4 A's and 3 B's, and I was so proud because I got my name on the honor board, a certificate for honor roll and a pizza party. When I got home though, and gave my report card to my mama, she was completely unimpressed, asking me, "What are these B's about?" And she was serious. Face crack. Whereas my brothers could fail to pass to the next grade or would even get kicked out of school altogether. After school I had to clean the living room, kitchen, bathroom, den, and my room, make sure my brother and I did our homework, and start dinner. Whereas my brother only had to do his homework, clean his room, and wipe the dining room table. I could never do anything to her satisfaction, and the harder I would try the more I seemed to fail. I honestly did not even know why she was mad at me half of the time. I was just always in trouble, another day, another whoop-in. I was getting beat for shit I might do the next day or may have done that she'd forgotten. For years I honestly believed she hated me, but I know now that it had everything to do with her wanting me to be my best self. As well as her trying to give me those things or teach me those lessons she felt she wasn't privileged. She wanted a life for me she did not have the pleasure of living and was trying to prepare me for the part. And that could not have been easy for her, raising a child like me. She's old school, stuck in her ways, and very, do as I say not as I do. And I definitely did not share her point of view, on anything. She had an idea or image in her head of who she wanted me to be though. Sometimes as parents we get so caught up in this type of enigma that we forcefully project our lost dreams on our children. And her method was not from a purposely abusive place, but due to her own lack of experience. She could not provide me what she had no knowledge of, because she did not get the chance to be raised by her own mother. Remind you, I'm her firstborn, the practiced child so to say. Now that I am grown, we are closer than ever, and I am grateful for our relationship today. Not only did I learn the true power in forgiveness, but I also learned to accept her for who she is, just as I am still requesting from her. Thanks to my mother, I also grew up a church girl. There 5 days a week and twice on Sunday. Being a member of the youth, women, and mass choir, junior usher board, president of the Sunbeam Society, girls' church youth group, praise dance team, and if a child was ever needed to read a scripture, poem, or take a role in the latest church play, best believe it was me. My mama has been best friends with Jesus since birth and was always active in the church, so that meant my brothers and I had to be as well. I always tell people I feel like I was raised by an angel and a devil, because my father, the Taurus, is just the opposite of my mother, the Virgo. He did the church thing for a while when they were still married, and even became a deacon for a short period. But that was short-lived because my daddy definitely lives his life doing what he wants with no apologies, still able to quote both the Bible and the Quran. Both of my parents are intellectuals and ambitious, but each come from opposite sides of the spectrum, which definitely proved later to serve to my advantage in life. My parents' opposing intellectual mindsets made me a natural scholar, so I was an honor roll student K through 12. But even so, I still struggled with the institutionalized way I was taught, and of course I hated rules. So, I often found myself in trouble at school as well, being sent to the principal's office, detention or suspended. It seemed I was always pissing off my teachers. Apparently, my mother was not the only one who had disdain for my boisterous personality. Many of my teachers were not a fan of my condescending follow-up questions to their answers that weren't making any sense to me, because no teacher wants to be challenged by a child. Nor did they appreciate that I would not accept the fact that a lot of those teachers were bullies. Even as a child, I have always believed that if you want respect, you got to give it. I don't owe you a damn thing. But most of those teachers, especially at my middle school, did not want to be there anyways, because it was the ghetto school with the ghetto kids. I remember this one teacher, named Ms. Lucky, that I had when I was in 6th grade. This lady would go out of her way to try to ruin my day. So of course, I used to have a blast making her look crazy whenever she would try to come for me, which only made her hate me more. I found my escape through different forms of the arts and joined any and every extracurricular activity I could squeeze in a schedule. I love music, and singing has always been a passion of mine, and I wrote songs as therapy to release whatever was plaguing my mind at the time. I played clarinet, so I was always in a marching or concert band. I also danced, wrote poetry, and even did some acting and modeling. It was something about being on a stage that gave me a natural high, even if it was just singing in the choir or playing with the band at a Christmas concert. I got an adrenaline rush from any chance to perform. I also enjoyed drawing and painting. Drawing houses and dresses were always my specialty. All of these were ways for me to avoid dealing with all of my thoughts and the dramas in my life. I always felt a sense of loneliness, but also learned early to love my own company. One of those skills developed as an army brat, but could be even more so contributed to the fact that I did not grow up with family. And by that, I mean actual blood relatives, which is why I have created my own family through the friends I collected throughout my life's journeys. These are people that, even if I do not see or speak to for years, whenever we do reconnect, it's just like yesterday. I call myself a gypsy because my life has been that of a nomad, meaning, we constantly moved around. So, I did not have many relatives beyond my parents and my brothers that I could call on or talk to. I knew a couple of aunts and uncles that I got to meet a few times as a child, but only formed bonds with one of my uncles and 3 of my aunties, none of whom I got to see or talk to often. Most painful is never having that grandparent experience, a fact that I didn't even know affected me until very recently. My mother lost her mom when she was 7 and was raised by her grandma and Aunt May Lois, one of those 3 aunts I actually got to form a bond with before she passed. Her father was MIA, and the rest of her family was beyond toxic. I got to meet Grandma Lucille a couple times, but I was too little to really remember much except those crystal blue eyes she had, even though she was my complexion. I was later told that this may have been because she was going blind, and she passed away when I was somewhere between the ages of 6 and 8. This is also around the time period my daddy lost his mama as well, both his biological and adopted mother. I never met his real mom but did get to meet Grandma Rose, and the only thing I really remember is when she laughed, she yelled out, "Hot dog." Not sure if this was something she did often, or just the one time I remember interacting with her, but it still makes me smile to this day. I also got to meet his father, my grandfather Richard, and actually got to sit down with him and listen to his stories, but this only happened twice in my life. I talked with him for about 2 hours the first time, and no more than 3 the second, but I could have listened to him talk forever. He actually lived to be 113 years old and is probably the most absolutely amazingly fascinating individuals to ever walk the earth. Both my parents were born and raised in the same tiny town of Havana, Florida, where they are related to practically the entire damn town. In fact, my Grandma Rose was one of the town's midwives and actually brought both my parents into this world. My dad's biological mother already had 5 children and was not doing very well taking care of them, so she gave my father to Grandma Rose so he could have a better life, which he did. For instance, he had his own car as a teenager at a time when most adult black people were still walking and riding the bus. But I am sure it was still traumatizing for him to grow up in that small town with the woman who gave him away living around the corner. Especially when she had another child after him which she kept, meaning my father was the only one she did not keep. Meanwhile, my mama was equally traumatized with abuse from her own family members, severe poverty, and not having a mother at all. And if that was not bad enough, her father wouldn't even call or send a birthday card. Her eyes still tear up telling the story about when she was little, and he began dating a woman down the street, getting this woman's child a bike for Christmas while not even wishing my mama a happy holiday. My heart breaks every time I think about it. Even crazier is the fact that before we left Germany her father finally reached out to her, but only because he was dying, and needed to ask her for a kidney due to his illness. How do you abandon your child their entire life and then turn around and ask them for a vital organ? Fortunately, my father stepped in and said to put the burden on him, and let that man know that it was not happening. Needless to say, this grandfather passed away before I ever got to meet him, but this definitely would not be anywhere on my list of regrets. It seems that once my father joined the military and married my mother, they left that small town and never looked back. And by the time we came back to the US, they had both lost the people they loved the most from that town, and I believe it may have been easier to just stay away at that point. However, for me there has always been this void and even a sense of envy for anyone who is surrounded by their own blood, blessed with opportunities to hear about the family history and able to form a true identity from that bloodline. Never getting the chance to form those type of bonds early in life left me with an insecurity that played its roles later in life. I tend to love hard with blind loyalty, sometimes to a detriment. It's taken a long time for me to understand that some people are only meant to be in your life for a reason and/or a season. If the relationship is toxic or unreciprocated, then it is not worth continuing. On the flip side, I am not a clingy or needy person, so my distant nature can often appear as uncaring. As I have gotten older, witnessing more and more people pass away too soon, I've learned to appreciate all of those I hold dear and ensure to give them their flowers while they're still here. In the last couple of years, I have also been blessed to have met and formed bonds with some of my actual blood relatives. I now have real cousins like Didi and Skia that I love so freaking much, and it feels absolutely amazing to have the privilege. What do you want to be when you grow up? I always hated that question, and even though I have children who are now grown, I still can't give a clear answer. I have never been able to give a defined picture of my future. I am what you can call a jack of all trades, and my interests are endless. At one point I wanted to be a doctor, and even majored in psychology my freshman year, and yet toyed with ideas like being a designer or even a teacher. There's one thing that I have no doubt about and always knew in my heart as truth though: I'm meant to do something spectacular and legendary. Never having any real idea as to what that something is though, when I'm supposed to do it, or even how. My love for entertainment convinced me at one point that I was supposed to be a superstar, like the next Whitney Houston or something. In hindsight, I am lucky that was not my fate. At the same time, I've always had a mind that never shuts up, always having 1,000,001 innovative ideas popping up, which I would always write down somewhere and thought maybe one day I'd be an entrepreneur of some kind. Still, I've never been able to articulate my future or goals in any decisive way, or the path I'd take to get there. However, I always felt a sense of conviction and urgency about this. And there was one more thing that I knew I had to accomplish no matter what. I have been hearing for as long as I can remember that there is a generational curse upon my mama's family, and when you look at her family it is obvious that they all fell victim. This is another one of those things that I always kept in the back of my mind, determined to break this curse by any means necessary. I guess you can say that I grew up believing that I was a mistake who was born cursed but destined for greatness. If you look up the words dramas, traumas, trials and tribulations, you will definitely see my picture by each and every one. There was never a calm period in my life, but rather parades of tsunamis, tornadoes, and hurricanes. Always in adversity with the world around me but refusing to allow anyone or anything to break me. I cannot even count the number of times I had someone in my ear trying to convince me of how I should behave, feel, or speak. Others around me seeing things one way, but never being able to share their vision. Everyone feeling strongly about something, and no matter my efforts, never finding this feeling. Always knowing that something about me was significantly different, but until recently unable to view as a positive thing, because my entire life I've been made to feel like I should have just tattooed "can't get right" on my forehead. At one point, I literally cursed God for allowing so much to happen to a little girl and never allowing me peace. But I always survived and often came out on the other side with an amazing testimony. It was still exhausting though, living on an emotional roller coaster of never-ending turmoil and chaos. I was extremely wise as a child though, in ways that most grown folks never even accomplish, and it did not help that I saw way too much too early and had endured more than most in my first decade of life. But I was still just a little girl viewing life through a child's eyes and processing in a childish mindset. I had not developed emotionally or mentally enough to handle the world that was my life. Showing weakness was not an option though, so I became a master of suppression and lived by my daddy's famous words: "You should never look like what you're going through." Plus, I am gifted with a warrior's spirit that has proven to be unbreakable. So, where do I even start? Because military life came with its own set of guaranteed traumatization. Beyond the constant uprooting and overly structured upbringing, as an army brat you were more than likely to witness volatile and toxic marriages, more infidelity than a daytime soap opera, functioning alcoholics/drug addicts, and I won't even get started on the fact that most of us children on the base had been molested at some point or another by the time we reached kindergarten. Personally, I was around 5 or 6 when I fell victim, and the majority of my guilt was not coerced but self-inflicted. My abuser never threatened me or my family, nor was I physically harmed like so many other victims. In fact, permission was asked before he proceeded, and without knowing what I was consenting to, I agreed. I was never asked to do anything, nor was I ever penetrated. Instead, he performed oral sex on me until I was forced to orgasm. Hence why I felt so ashamed. How do you tell your parents something like that without being blamed? So, I kept this secret for decades, along with many others. You should also understand that there was a street code, so to say, when you live on the base. What happens here, stays here. It was one of those unspoken rules that was sacred to the military culture. So, it's rare you would find anyone actually speaking on anything like that, even in their own immediate military family circles. And even more often, most lived on the principle of don't ask, don't tell, like ignoring the issues made them disappear. As a child, I would literally watch the adults interact with each other as if I were watching a blockbuster film, while they all gave their Oscar-winning performances in their phony interactions, trying to mask obvious truths. Like the high-ranking officer's elegant wife at a dinner party, passive-aggressively trying to mask her disdain, because her husband's lover is in the same room, and of course everyone already knows the tea. Scandalous. You couldn't write better scripts than the constant drama that was military life. Then there's the separation anxiety you was assured to procure at some point as a military child, between the heart-wrenching friend relocation rotation schedule you would innately acquire, along with the constant threat or reality of your family being split up. Our family was forced to move wherever my father was stationed, so we relocated more times than I can remember before I even reached elementary, from Florida to Virginia to several bases in Germany. The worst for me was when they sent my dad off to Desert Storm. I was so angry at him for leaving me alone with my mom, because at that time I really believed she hated me, and my daddy has always been my best friend. I remember listening to Frank Sinatra's records, My Way, and New York, every single day until he returned because I knew how much he loved those songs. Hoarding the VHS tape with the celebrity tribute to the troops called Voices That Care, which was followed by a Whitney Houston concert she also did for the troops. Watching it over and over again hoping maybe I would see my daddy, because in those days all I kept repeating in my head was, I just needed to see my daddy. One of my longest periods of waiting in my entire life, always wondering if we were ever going to see him again. It was torture and I would cry myself to sleep every night, and the nights were already hard for me. Nighttime and I have a love/hate relationship that goes back to my earliest memories. Beyond my lifelong insomnia, I guess I have what some may consider visions, but they always came in forms of dreams. However, as a child I did not know these were visions, only that they scared me to death. I can still to this day remember vividly some of those dreams, how intense and sometimes horrifying they would be. I would often have night terrors, dreams of watching something happening to a loved one but I can't move or scream, or being in a place so dark I can't see my own hand, but I can feel that I am being preyed on. I've seen things I should have never been able to see, or knew things I shouldn't have, all because of my dreams. It got to the point that I was mastering taking control of some of these dreams, like if I was falling, I was able to make myself fly. The most significant dreams to me are those that seem random, and I have no clue its significance, but certain details will remain stuck in my psyche of the scene itself. Fast forward, I would find myself in the exact scene of my dream, remembering the smell, or the music, or something someone might say. Problem with this is every time I find myself in this type of déjà vu, so to say, it is immediately followed by something life-altering, and I never know whether it's going to be good or bad, but it always guarantees to be extreme. Around the age of 8 I had one dream that would change my world forever, but at the time all I knew is that it terrified me to my very core. So much so that when I finally became conscious my mama was standing over me looking distressed and a little scared. My face was dripping with tears and sweat, and apparently, I was crying and screaming in my sleep, which is what alerted my mom in the first place. It took me a minute to answer her when she repeatedly asked me what my dream was about because it was like I had not fully entered back into my body yet. In this dream we were in the same apartment we were living in at the time in Stuttgart. As I turned the corner to our living room everything became extremely dim as if the sun just fell right out the sky. The energy became heavy and almost mournful as I continued into the living room. I could see my father standing alone on the balcony straight ahead of me, when all of a sudden everything goes silent and everyone else disappears. This feeling of dread weighs heavier and heavier on me as I scope the empty room and turn back to my father. I turn to him just as the railing to our balcony gives out while my father is leaning back on it. I tried to run, but it was like I was in a slow-motion scene because my father's fall was moving at the same speed. But I can't get to him, and he falls 3 stories. Crazy thing is I never saw him when I looked to the ground, but somehow, I just knew, my father was gone. It would not be long after that dream, and a few others just as traumatizing, that my mom suggested that I pray for God to take them away, at least until I am able to handle them. Once I finally did, I would go years without a single dream, and even those that would sneak in, would be forgotten just as fast. My father had only been home from his last tour in Desert Storm for a little while when I had that last dream about him. And although his homecoming was a dream come true, something changed about my father while he was in Saudi Arabia. I was never able to pinpoint exactly what it was, but it was obvious something happened while he was gone, and he did not return the same man he was when he left. He even received a Medal of Honor that is only given to soldiers who either died or faced near death, but I have yet to get the story. In fact, when you do ask him about it, the only thing he does is begin this weird rant that starts off with, "There I was, knee-deep in grenade pins. So annoying." The most obvious, and creepiest, side effect we noticed was his new ability to sleep with his eyes open. He would be snoring louder than a freight train, but I could see the white of his eyeballs. Not cool, man, not cool. He seemed less joyful in some ways too, carrying a darker energy than before. My intuition proved to be right too. Not only was his alcoholism at an all-time high, but he was disrespecting my mom in the most public ways with no remorse. I am not going to lie, my father always cheated on my mother. In fact, up until about 1st grade, I was his main alibi, using me, by telling my mom things like we were going to the movies or getting something to eat, when we were in fact actually meeting up with one of his hoes. I hated this because I would actually be thinking I was about to be spending time with my daddy, only to be disappointed repeatedly, a dynamic that would become our Achilles heel later down the line. This ended abruptly the day I walked in on my mom with a face full of tears, begging me to tell her what I knew. Initially, I went into my routine of cute childish ignorance, but for whatever reason, this time, I could not lie to her, and I confessed everything I knew, because I could not stand being a part of what was hurting her any longer. I often wondered if this played a part in our tumultuous relationship but never actually dared to ask. After coming back from war, my father had also become extremely abusive towards my mother in a way I'd never actually witnessed before. It would even get to the point that I would forcefully intervene because I was not going to just stand by and watch him hurt her, even though in reality I had absolutely no power in these situations between the ages of 6 and 8 years old. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to screams and sounds of struggle, only to walk into our living room and see my dad twisting my mom's arm behind her back as if he was about to break it. Without hesitation I would run to my mama's rescue screaming at my dad to stop and let her go. Crazy part is that as soon as he would realize my presence and look me in my eyes, he would stop, almost as if he could not bear the thought of me thinking of him as some sort of monster. And getting back to his cheating, which was on another level of ridiculousness. Going so far as to publicly start fights with my mom at dinner parties with their colleagues, just so he could have an excuse to leave for the evening to be with his pick of the night. Until that one day I came home from school to find the military police, MPs, standing outside our building with a warrant for my father's arrest for statutory rape because he cheated on my mother with a 17-year-old. It was at that moment I realized that the dream I had was not about my father's death, but his demise. I will never forget the day they sentenced my father. I was never allowed to actually tell my father goodbye. In fact, I never saw him again after they arrested him originally. I was not allowed to go to the hearings either, so I ran home as fast as I could after school that day to see if there was any news. My mom was already there, but she was still waiting to hear something as well. Not too long after, I remember a gentleman coming up the apartment stairs as I stood in the hallway. Before he even made it to my mother, he began to shake his head, disappointed to have to even deliver this news. I don't remember crying, but I will always remember the look on my mother's face because it was the first time that I can remember ever seeing my mama defeated, and it killed me a little inside. My mother is what I like to call elite lady perfection, and poise was a skill she mastered. I've witnessed this skill set in play plenty over the years, for instance watching my mom entertain a house full of people that had no clue that right before they arrived my father had utterly disrespected, and nor had my mom in tears. I knew that she walked around most days with a broken heart, but no one else was none the wiser. My mama was a God-fearing woman who would faithfully take her heartache to the altar before the Lord because she was willing to fight for her marriage. I can only imagine the thoughts she must have had as the reality set in that her husband has been dishonorably discharged from his E7 position with the army and was about to be sent to a military penitentiary, and our military lifestyle had come to a drastic end.